fellow Pokémon trainers, I am Corey from SKG 9000, and welcome back to Pokémon Month! Do you want to be the best like no one ever was? Well, then you should definitely check out today's Top 10 video. The mother of all Top 10s. And that's because the Pokemon themselves are incredibly iconic. Every single one of them. But there are 3 distinctive Pokemon from every single generation, which I feel are the ultimate representations of the games that they are from. And I am talking about the incredibly iconic, the super adorable, the badass starter Pokemon. And currently we know every single starter Pokemon that exists in generations 1 through 7, so I thought it was finally time to count down my top 10 starter Pokemon. First up, let's lay down a couple of ground rules for this top 10 list. There are no rules. If it's a Pokemon that you can receive at the beginning of a Pokemon game, then it is going to make it on this list. However, I am not taking stats into account. These are simply the starter Pokemon that I myself like for various reasons. It could be because of the way they look, it could be the attacks that they use, it could be because you could play as them in Super Smash Bros. These are simply just the starter Pokemon that I really like. The ones that are my absolute favorite. If you guys have a favorite starter Pokemon or can even count down your top 10 favorites, tell me who they are in the comment section below. Because remember, that's the beauty of the Pokemon series. We all have our own opinions and our very own favorite Pokemon, so let's share this amazing diversity in the comments section, and make sure to tell me your favorite stories about your favorite starter Pokemon. And of course, to build up a little more hype for Pokemon Sun and Moon, what starter are you going to choose? So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. These are my top 10 favorite starter Pokemon. Carrying the very earth on its back at number 10 is the gargantuan grass turtle, Torterra. Torterra the Terrible, Torterra the Tyrant, Torterra the Landlord. Torterra is an amazing Pokemon with such an incredibly unique design. What I think I love most about this is how it takes from the mythology of the turtle with the world on its back. And they really take that seriously. The whole point of Torterra is that it has an entire living ecosystem hanging out on its massive shell, with trees growing out on one side and craggy rocks growing out on the other. It's even been said in its Pokedex entries that certain Pokemon spend their entire lives living on the back of this massive beast. Torterra, of course, is the evolution of Turtwig. When they were first introduced in Generation 4, Turtwig was without a doubt my favorite starter from that generation. I especially love the fact that it was a cute little turtle with a little twig on his head. And he also had this really cool shell, which according to his Pokedex entry, is made out of soil. He eventually evolves into Grottle, which reminds me very much of an Ankylosaur. Even more so when it actually evolves into Torterra, taking a lot of inspiration from turtles and dinosaurs in general. What I will say is this thing is an absolute tank and your best buddy all in one. He's essentially a Winnebago Pokemon. If Captain Planet and the Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park could somehow conceive a child, I imagine it would be our number 9 choice, Sceptile. That's right, the bladed lizard of doom Sceptile makes his way to the number 9 spot, and I think it's for obvious reasons. This is a super well-designed Pokemon. Not to mention it's very viable in battle, especially after the release of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, gaining a Mega Evolution, which transforms it into a terrifying grass dragon with a stinger at the end of its tail. This is another one of those Pokemon that when they introduced it in its generation, that being Generation 3, I was instantly hooked. I immediately knew that I was going to go with Trico. As a child, I was always obsessed with reptiles and dinosaurs, so I was always instantly drawn to those, especially if they were a starter Pokemon, and Trico is no different. In fact, its evolution Grovyle takes even more inspiration from its dinosaur brethren. I especially love the ultimate combination of being both an actual reptilian creature with actual leaves incorporated into its design, letting you know that this is a grass-type Pokemon. Of course, its signature move, the Leaf Blade, makes sense. It is covered with sharp leaves from head to toe. And speaking of toes, what's so unique about this Pokemon is its ability to run through the forest and climb just about any surface or tree. Sceptile in particular, despite the fact that it does look very intimidating, is actually a very timid and humble Pokemon, always looking out for the forest by planting seeds and protecting everything within. Essentially, it is the guardian of the forest. Like I said, it's Captain Planet, and it'll spit acid in your face. Well, maybe not so much the acid in your face, but that would be a pretty cool addition. But it doesn't even need that, because Sceptile is awesome, and that's why he's at number 9. Bringing the pain and really loving it at number 8 is Cinna Roar, the Fire Dark-type Heal Pokemon. That's right, we're finally breaking into Gen 7 territory in freaking Cinna Roar. This Pokemon is just so awesome. I love the inspiration behind it too, the fact that it is known as a heel wrestler, which, if you don't know, those are basically the bad guys in wrestling. These are the guys that pick up the fold-up chairs and smack people in the back, and then get right up on top of the ropes playing it to the crowd. And Cinna Roar is that Pokemon in spades. I especially love the unique design of this thing. When it started out as a Litten and then eventually becoming a Torracat, I thought that it was going to be an all-fours quadrupedal Pokemon, but actually it got up on all of its legs and decided it's time to start whipping ass with its big-ass beefy arms, which come in really handy because it has this amazing move which is known as the Darkest Lariat, which not only looks hilariously badass in action, but dishes out the pain as well. I really love the fact that this thing has a belt which is made of fire, which, according to the Pokedex entry, it claims that this is the fire erupting from its navel, which takes the form of a wrestling belt. It can only make sense in the Pokemon world. It's kind of like Machamp's Speedo, just don't think about it too much. My favorite thing about this Pokemon is that before it was officially revealed, everybody had the theory that it was going to end up being another fire-fighting type. And I have to admit, after seeing what it actually looks like, I believed that as well. But getting the dark typing actually makes sense considering that it is actually based on the heal type of wrestler. This was truly a really well thought out Pokemon, and despite the fact that it can look a little goofy at times, you gotta admit, this is just a really fun, kick-ass fire starter that I cannot wait to bring into the ring in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Melting my heart since his introduction at the number 7 spot is Ashwaw. I still can't explain why I like this Pokemon so much. You know, I don't even really care about its evolutions, Dewott and Samurott. Yeah, they're really cool. They're based on Samurai. I really like the fact that Samurott can pull out some swords, but freaking Ashwaw, just so damned adorable. I mean, this is the only Pokemon that I've actually bought a plushie for. I never do that for any Pokemon. I'm not even into that type of shit. But for some reason, this just cuddly little sea otter Pokemon just absolutely melts my heart in every single way. That and the fact that it's such a little trooper, it always continues to want to fight on. That's one of the coolest things about it is its unique design, the fact that it actually has this shell on its chest, which it can remove, and it can use its signature move, the Razor Shell. Essentially, at the end of the day, Ashwaw is a samurai in training, but he's the most adorable starter I've ever seen. I just love him. He's pitifully adorable. I can't explain it, and that's why I had to put him on the list, guys. He's just one of my favorites. Simple as that. Let's move ahead. Ashwaw, I love you, buddy. Coming in at number 6 is a Pokemon whose bite is much stronger than its bark, Feraligatr. Very similar to Turtwig and Treecko, in the second generation Pokemon games, I was instantly drawn to Totodile. I loved Totodile. Its simple design, which was both cute and kind of cool all at the same time. Not to mention, for some reason, he sounded like Donald Duck in the Pokemon anime series. But as he evolves, he starts to become even more devastatingly powerful, transforming into a Croconaw, which starts to look a little more like a dinosaur. Not to mention the actual patterns on his body kind of make him look like a caveman, but eventually he goes full feral when he becomes Feraligatr. Isn't that a little weird that he goes from Totodile, Croconaw to Feraligatr, from being a crocodile-inspired creature and turning into an alligator? I know, it's weird. At the end of the day, they're simply just Pokemon. But Feraligatr is just so freaking cool looking. I love the color scheme on this Pokemon. It's not too often that you can see pink on something and call it badass, but it manages to really work with this Pokemon, with the weird sort of turquoise, aqua blue-esque color, those super shiny, shimmering pink spikes, truly living up to his name as a feral Pokemon. Feraligatr has always been one of my favorites, and like many of the other starter Pokemon from the series, I really wish that he would get a Mega Evolution. I really wish all the starters could get it, but there's so much potential for Feraligatr. They could give him a new type, maybe turn him into a dragon, or an ice type, or something unique. I don't know. I just think it's possible with a Pokemon like this. All I know is, I love Feraligatr. He's one of my favorites, and probably my favorite crocodilian Pokemon from the entire series. Blasting your face off at number 5 is Blastoise. Talk about iconic. Easily one of the most memorable Pokemon from the entire series. The original water starter Blastoise is just amazing. I remember when the Pokemon games were coming out for the very first time, just about every single person that I knew was going with Pokemon Red. And honestly, I can't blame them. Look at the cover. It's got a giant freaking fire-breathing red dragon on the cover. I mean, how would you not want that? But for some odd reason, I was really intrigued by this massive turtle with huge-ass cannons coming out of its back. I just thought it was really unique. I'd never seen anything like that in my life, and that's what swayed me to get Pokemon Blue, and I'm glad I did, even though I decided to go with Bulbasaur, but eventually I did get the chance to get a Squirtle, a Wartortle, and a Blastoise. And man, these Pokemon are just like the perfect representation of water types in just about every way. They're just perfect. Every single one of them. Squirtle is absolutely adorable. I think we can all agree it's one of the most unique starters from the series, not to mention it became even more iconic in the Pokemon anime when it was the leader of the Squirtle Squad. That's right, this thing predates Kamina by a good couple of years, so basically Squirtle was the trendsetter for these badass pointy glasses. And then there's Wartortle, who I'm still trying to make sense of this Pokemon to this day. The fact that it's got this like weird bushy tail and these hilarious ears, which all suddenly disappear when it transforms into Blastoise, and Blastoise is just a perfect design. From top to bottom, this big, bulky turtle is great. Its massive cannons are instrumental in its battle, not to mention when it Mega Evolves, it gains an additionally larger cannon on its back with 2 on its hands. This is definitely one of the most iconic Pokemon, period. And that's also why it's one of my favorite Pokemon from the series. Occasionally, I still manage to use Blastoise. I still think he has some viability in battle. I really love him. I loved Squirtle in Smash Brothers. Wartortle is okay, honestly, in my opinion, but the fact that he's just so unique from the other ones is kind of the reason why I like him so much. I compare a lot of the Pokemon on this list to a tank, but Blastoise actually is a living tank. Despite the fact that those cannons on his back shoot water, that water is devastatingly powerful and can pretty much wreck just about everything. Blastoise is one of the most iconic water types and one of my favorite from the entire series. Burning up the competition at number 4 is Charizard. What do I even say about Charizard? I mean, everybody has talked about this Pokemon in length for like the past 20 years. It's arguably one of the most popular Pokemon, period. It's playable in Super Smash Bros. It's got two Mega Evolutions, both of which are incredibly unique in their own way. Mega Charizard Y being incredibly fast and super sleek and arguably more usable than Mega Charizard X. But don't count this Pokemon out. Mega Charizard X is really the main reason I love Charizard so much. Is this not one of the coolest looking Mega Evolutions that you've ever seen? Not to mention, it actually allowed Charizard fans to live out their ultimate fantasy by transforming Charizard into a dragon type. And let's not count out the little guys Charmander and Charmeleon. Charmander is one of my favorite Pokemon from the anime series. It was one of the very first episodes that I ever saw. In fact, I believe it was the second episode of the Pokemon anime that I've ever seen. It was an incredibly sympathetic story about Ash actually finding this Charmander, which was abandoned by this trainer by the name of Damien, who was such a douchebag and had the most annoyingly fake British accent I've ever seen, but that's beside the point. The point is, Charmander ended up being one of the most popular Pokemon from the series because eventually it would become a Charizard, who is one of Ash's most wildly powerful Pokemon, so much in fact that he had a really tough time actually learning to train this thing. There were a lot of great moments from the series I remember, like Charizard fighting Magmar. That was probably one of my favorite Pokemon battles, period. When I was younger, everyone loved Charizard, and I kind of shunned him for a long period of time. But in the last couple of years, I've really started to appreciate Charizard as one of the most iconic characters from the entire series. That's right, characters. He's one of the most memorable Nintendo icons ever! And frankly, I can't wait to see more. I think that Charizard has a very bright future. Emerging from the shadows at the number 3 spot is the new owl on the block, Decidueye. Every once in a while, there's a Pokemon that has an absolute perfect design, and that is Decidueye in spades. Not only does this Pokemon take a lot of inspiration from Robin Hood, but it also manages to have a disturbing amount of character to it, and a lot of that is probably owed to the brand new Pokemon Me feature, which was introduced in Pokemon X and Y. Pokemon can now display a lot of personality, and Decidueye certainly has tons of that. I love the fact that it has these little grass tassels which can pull down to actually make its hoodie a little bit smaller. I love the fact that it uses those tassels as a bowstring in conjunction with its very own feathered arm to fire an arrow. And I absolutely love the fact that this is easily one of the most unique starter Pokemon simply because it is a grass ghost. Why is an owl a ghost? I don't know, but I'm not going to complain. I just love the uniqueness of all of it. Its previous evolutions are also, I think, just as easily iconic at this point. Rowlet is adorable. I think we can all agree on that one. And Dartrix is just hilarious, especially with its little hair, which I've compared in the past to Doctor Who, but I can see where a lot of people get the whole emo thing from. But it's weird that these two goofy-looking Pokemon evolve into this super badass Robin Hood-inspired owl. I cannot wait to use this in Pokemon Sun and Moon. The minute I saw Decidueye, it basically just solidified the fact that I am going to choose a Rowlet for my journey. Eventually, of course, I will get around to using Cinna Roar and Primarina, but really, I'm most looking forward to taking this owl into battle. Coming in at number 2 for me personally is the most nostalgic Pokemon on my list, Venusaur. That's right, the chickens have come home to roost. It's time to give some honor to Venusaur. This is a Pokemon that I feel gets overshadowed by Blastoise and Charizard. Everybody forgets that Venusaur exists. But Venusaur, for me, is my most nostalgic Pokemon. The very first Pokemon that I ever chose was a Bulbasaur. For me, this was a really big deal. I had no idea that I would become attached to this Pokemon, and I'll be damned if it almost made number 1. It was a really tough decision. every single member of the Bulbasaur family is amazing. Of course, Bulbasaur himself is easily one of the most iconic. Hell, he is #1 in the National Pokedex. He is where Pokemon begins. What I especially love about the design of Bulbasaur, again, is that it manages to be cute and intimidating all at the same time, and of course a perfect representation of its typing, being both an animal and having plant-like elements like the bulb on its back, which when it evolves starts to blossom when it becomes an Ivysaur. Ivysaur is basically a tougher looking version of Bulbasaur, and he's even a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I really hope that if they decide to port over Super Smash Bros. Wii U over to the Switch, that eventually they'll decide to bring both Squirtle and Ivysaur back into the fold. Hell, maybe they can up the ante and just make it a Blastoise and a Venusaur. That way we'll have full representation from the first generation of games in their fully evolved forms. I think they could make it happen. I think Ivysaur was unique enough in that game to make it work. And Venusaur, man, Venusaur is awesome. When I was playing Pokemon Red and Blue back in the day, he was the Pokemon who pretty much got me through the entire game. He was the Pokemon that I kept on my team the entire time, all the way up to the Elite Four. And for me, he's just one of my favorite Pokemon, period. Not just starter, but he's a Pokemon that I've always kept really close to me. I still occasionally use him in the games. He has a Mega Evolution in Pokemon XY, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, which made him even more iconic, and I just really can't express in words why I love Venusaur. He's just classic. And finally, at #1, my absolute favorite starter Pokemon of all time is the Water Dart-type Ninja Frog, Greninja. Here's a little fun fact about me. I love ninjas. To me, they're like the coolest freaking thing on the planet. It's why I like Naruto so much. It's why I've played the crap out of Ninja Gaiden like a million times. And it's also why I love Greninja. Of the top 10 Pokemon lists that I've made, there are 2 Pokemon that have appeared the most. Gengar and Greninja. And honestly, I think it's for a good reason. Greninja has an incredibly unique design, heavily inspired by the ninjas of Japanese mythology. I love that it uses its tongue as its scarf. That's great. I love that it constantly does ninja poses. I love that it creates shuriken out of the water from its body. This is just the perfect representation of a ninja in the Pokemon series. Its pre-evolved forms are also just as amazing and well thought out, with Froakie being incredibly adorable and covered in bubbles, and Frogadier finally starting to become the Jonin himself. Essentially, if you're a fan of the Naruto series, the best way to look at this is that Froakie is the Genin, Frogadier is the Chunin, and Greninja is the Jonin. Or as I like to call him, the Mizukage Master. Not to mention, it has one of the coolest shiny forms in the entire game, making it even more ninja-like by giving it a jet black appearance. It's so popular that it actually appeared in the Super Smash Bros. Series, not as a Pokeball Pokemon, but as an actual playable character. That's right, of all the starters, they actually decided to go with Greninja, and honestly, he feels right at home in the Super Smash Bros. Series. And the cherry on top of the kick-ass ninja sundae is that Greninja himself has a unique ability known as Battle Bond in Pokemon Sun and Moon. If you play the Pokemon Sun and Moon demo, you're given a special Greninja, and if it actually manages to knock out a Pokemon in battle, Battle Bond is activated, and it suddenly transforms into the super-powered Ash-Greninja. That's right, Ash's special Greninja from the anime is actually playable and usable in the Pokémon video games. This blew my mind when I saw it for the very first time, and I'm glad that I played through the demo, as frankly, in this game, I'm definitely going to use that Ash Greninja. I love that they're incorporating some of those elements into the game series, and again, this is just another reason why Greninja is so unique. He doesn't have a Mega Evolution, but his Battle Bond effectively turns him into a mega form. His newly designed form takes a lot of inspiration from the aesthetics of Ash, and he even has this massive water shuriken that he keeps on his back, which is incredibly devastating and can attack multiple times. I really hope that in the future installments of Super Smash Bros. We have an alternate costume to make him look like Ash-Greninja, adding a little more uniqueness to this already badass ninja Pokemon. And that is why Greninja is my favorite starter Pokemon from the series. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my top 10 favorite starter Pokemon from the series. Did any of your favorites make the list? Do you have a favorite starter Pokemon or top 10 favorite starter Pokemon? Tell me who they are in the comments section below and why. And make sure to tell me what you're hoping to see in the upcoming release of Pokemon Sun and Moon and the future of the Pokemon series. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, that way you'll be able to see our latest reviews, Pokemon videos, and even our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. I would also really appreciate it if you did like this video to please leave a like or a comment or two. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you next time. And as always, stay dandy, baby.